I don't know if I've ever told you guys about my brief political career. If I have, indulge me again. If I haven't, it was small politics, little things. My hometown, Wilson, North Carolina. It was in like 1994. I was in middle school and ran for class president. And so I go for class president. You know, they make the announcement and they're having like student body government kind of stuff. And my buddy Chip was my campaign manager. And we sat there and we got a plan together, man. And you got to know my campaign promise, like my slogan. All right, so if you need something good when you run for an office, a vote for Chris just can't miss. You like that? Now, I wish we'd have made that up in 1994. We had nothing. There was no slogan, no plan, no platform. I do remember sitting at my house with my friend Chip, and we made a sign. It was like, vote for Chris Willard for class president. I don't know where we hung that sign. I don't know if it made it to the school. I have no idea. But what I do know is I was completely surprised one day when I showed up to the school, and they were like, today is class president speeches. We're doing speeches for people running for class president. I was like, oh, shoot, like, what am I supposed to say? I did briefly have a conversation with one of my friends saying that, like, as president, I promise we'll have, like, slushy machines in the cafeteria. And I found out later that's like, you can't do, that's not a thing. You can't just bring in slushy machines to the cafeteria. But so I get up on stage, and my classmates that are also running for class president, they crush it, man. They get up there, they got these speeches, they got ideas, like plans and stuff. Like someone must have worked with them. And like I'm like, oh my goodness. And people are like laughing at their jokes and they're clapping along. I'm like, and it's slowly like it's getting to me. My last name is Woolard, which means my entire life I go last. That's what that means. Alphabetically, W is last in most things. So it's my turn. And I get up there. I tell you no lie when I say this is what it looked like. I opened with something like, hey, oh, ooh, that's loud. And then I did this. Thank you. I sat down. I said nothing. My principal came over to me and she was like, I want you to get back up there. I want you to show them our Toys Not Middle School pride. I want you to get up there and I want you to And so I got up there and I was like, Miss Perry said I had to come back up here. Thanks. Sat back down. I was terrified. Now, I am a professional public speaker now. I want to tell you, I'm a testimony. Your life can change. But like 7th grade Chris was not feeling it that day. And man, I didn't win. I don't know if you were wondering. I didn't win. I can't tell you who did win, but I can tell you this. I was mortified. I was so embarrassed. And there was a shame that I carried with me for weeks. I mean, maybe a little bit right now. It's a funny story you can tell now. But even then, I'm like, you did that? Bruh. Like, at least write some. I even had index cards. I wish I could find those index cards because I wonder what I wrote on them. I didn't read them. Have you ever had a moment like that where you just had, I'm going to give us a word today. This is going to be a guiding word as we get into today's talk. The word is shame. You're just like, what an idiot I am. You ever felt that way? And maybe you didn't like totally bail on a student class president speech, but maybe you did something else that you know, it's a secret that you have. Maybe it was very public like me. Maybe it was very private. And your shame is actually, I hope nobody finds out. Or maybe the few people that do didn't take it well. Shame is a heavy thing to carry. And as we get into today's talk, I want to introduce us to a lady who I believe probably carried a lot of shame, and we see it come out in her story. And she encounters Jesus and what he did in her life to make that shame go away and give her new purpose. And so if you got your Bibles today, grab them. We're going to be in the book of John today. We are in a 11-week, I think, series through the book of John, the Gospel of John. The Gospels are 4 different books in the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they're all biographies of the life of Jesus and his teachings, and we meet a lot of his closest followers, and we hear a lot of his teachings. And the book of John is unique. It stands out from the other 3 in the way that he tells stories. He kind of adds a couple of different stories that the others don't include, and the timeline's a little bit differently, and he kind of kind of approaches things more thematically. And so if you've missed any of our teaching so far, I'd encourage you to go back to our podcast, look for Venture Church Wilmington on any of your podcast players. It'll be there. You'll get to see one of our graduated seniors, Ty, preach a couple weeks ago. As we've started in the very first chapter of John, and now we're going to be in chapter 4. And we're kind of skipping a rock through the book of John and asking ourselves, what can we learn about the life of Jesus? So we're going to be in John chapter 4, if you want to go and flip over there today. And we're going to meet a lady who's going to teach us a lot about how to manage the shame that we deal with. Here we go. John chapter 4, starting in verse 4. Now, he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. And Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. It's middle of the day. A little story going on here. There's a lot of cool history that I could get into. I'm going to touch on just a little bit of it later. It's interesting because this is a passage that tends to get preached on a lot and taught on a lot. I've done it many times here. So each time I approach it, I try to ask myself, like, what is another nuance we could pull out or something we can grow from throughout this thing? The thing that I think that really jumps out to me, and especially as it occurs to this kind of topic of shame, which is why I go there today, is the time of day and what this lady is doing. Typically, the women of the town would go to the local well, which would be right outside the town, maybe right in the middle of the town, depending on where the well was. And they would go early in the morning, and they would go as a group. And you would take all the jugs and the buckets and the containers, and you would take the children, and everybody's carrying stuff on their heads or on poles or under their arms or on ropes, and because you got to get all the water first thing in the morning. You're cooking your food, you're washing your kids, you're washing your clothes. You've got, of course, water to drink. And so they're doing all this thing, and they go early in the morning because you do it as a group. Not only are you doing it as a group maybe for the ease of carrying heavy water, but also it's a social event. I mean, you're hanging out with, all the people in the town. The men have gone off to the fields to work. They're doing their stuff to contribute to the family, and one of the main things that the ladies did first thing in the morning was to go get the water. Imagine not having running water. Imagine having to walk down the block and meet all the neighbors around the watering hole. So this is what they're doing, but that is not what this lady's doing. If you've heard this story before, you kind of notice she's all by herself. So there's a social aspect to this, but there's also a timing aspect to this. It's in the middle of the day. It's at noon. After I got out of college, actually, I was in college. I spent a whole summer in West Africa in Ghana. So it's right on the equator near there. It's very hot. And I remember me and a couple of my buddies that had come from America, we were out there playing soccer. And it was like noon. And some of the Ghanaian guys that we were hanging out with was like, what are y'all doing? It's hot. And we were like, we're playing soccer. Don't you want to play soccer? I said, yeah, we'll play soccer later. And he said, man, only dogs and white Americans are going to come here and play soccer at noon. Y'all are fools. And so we're like, oh. And so there's this concept of like, it's the middle of the day. Like, you don't have to do this in the middle of the day. It's hot. She comes in the middle of the day. She comes by herself. Why? Now you could just say, it was an off day for her. She just had to get some extra water. She had run out. But we're going to find out, and I believe this is true. She came because she's hiding from something. She doesn't want to be with people. She doesn't want to talk about it. And so we look at the rest of the story. Picking up in verse 7, we're going to keep going. Verse 7. So Jesus is at the well, okay? He walks up to this well. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? His disciples had gone to town to buy some food. The Samaritan woman said to him, you are a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep, so where are you going to get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock? Jesus answered, well, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water, welling up to eternal life. The woman said to him, sir, give me that water then so that I won't get thirsty and I won't have to keep coming here to draw water. He told her, okay, go call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, yeah, you're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you've had 5 husbands, and the man that you're with now is not your husband. What you've said is quite true. So there it is, okay? That's the woman at the well story. That's who we're meeting. That's who came at noon. She's coming away from all the other people in the village. And I think if you read between the lines and as you see kind of how history has treated this story, I think she may have been carrying a little bit of shame, a little bit of pain, a little bit of something she didn't want people to get into. She had already had 5 husbands, and now she's living with a man that's not her husband. And so she was living in such a way, like we can't project onto her all the things that might have happened to her. She could have legitimately had 5 husbands pass away, and then she needed to marry again. That could have happened, but that doesn't seem to be the case as we continue to read the story. In fact, what is probably more the case is that a lady like this, with that many relationships like that, would have been looked at a certain way by the rest of the village. They kind of would look at her as like a floozy, like a hussy. Like, wait, what's up with her? You know, she got a bad reputation. What's screaming from this story is the fact that she's all alone at noon. And the truth is, I think that there was a lot going on with this woman, and she didn't want anybody to talk about it. She didn't want to look anybody else in the eye. She didn't want to share anybody's water bucket as you go down to the well. She just wanted to be by herself. And I don't think that she was able to talk to anybody about it. I don't know. We don't know a lot about her, but here's what we do know. Jesus sees that, and he's made an appointment with her at the well. And he comes, sits there, and he waits for her. I want to talk about shame for just a minute, because on the one hand, this is a narrative we could talk about and be like, okay, that's cool. And you could probably draw like all kinds of neat ideas out of this. But I want to dig into the concept of shame today. There's a psychologist named Gershon Kaufman. He's got a really great definition for shame. He says, shame is a wound that we feel from the inside, and it divides us both from ourselves and from one another. Let that sink in. Shame is a wound that we feel from the inside, and what does it cause? Separation from ourselves. I don't even want to look at myself, and from other people. I don't want to talk about it. Shame's a burden. And how we carry it impacts how we allow others to see us. Now, shame has got a cousin called guilt. And I think this is generally true. I like this division. Shame and guilt are not the same thing. Guilt is a doing word. You did something wrong. I'm speeding down Market Street, and I got pulled over, and I got a speeding ticket. I was guilty. I deserve a ticket because I went too fast. That's guilt. Guilt is kind of a legal word. It's a doing word. But shame is a being word. Shame doesn't just say, I did something wrong, that maybe you did. But shame says, there's something wrong with me. I'm broken. I'm not enough. I don't measure up. I'm wounded from the inside. And it can come in many forms, like maybe you made a mistake years ago, but it just still follows you. Or maybe you measure yourself against your peers. And this happens a lot in parenting and in marriages. You look at other people's kids and you're like, how come their kids just go to bed when they tell them to? Like, what's wrong with me? Am I like raising this kid wrong? How come they eat broccoli? Like my kids will only eat, whatever, chicken nuggets and Cheetos. Like that's all they'll eat. And I can't get them to do it. And we see that and we start to internalize it. Like maybe it's me. Maybe I'm broken. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe you haven't had the same opportunities as other people, but you wear that as shame. You didn't have the same education. You didn't have the same parents or go to the same type of school or get the opportunities to have the same, training or whatever it is. Wear the same clothes, have the same kind of money, right? And those are like realities, and there's something in that. You can do something with that. But for some reason, our psychology makes it about me, and I'm not enough. I'm broken. There's something wrong. See, shame is a wound we feel from the inside, and it's not the same as guilt. Now, sometimes guilt and shame go hand in hand. I think some part of the repentance process, like if you did something wrong, there is a piece of it that we're just like, yeah, I also feel kind of icky inside. Like I think God builds that in and it's okay. But there's got to be a point at which we say, okay, I can't continue to identify myself this way. Once I pay the price for my guilt, or especially as we talk about who Jesus is, he gives us grace and he gives us forgiveness, right? You can get past the guilt, so therefore you don't have to continue to carry the shame. Have you ever felt shame? You probably have on some level. And so maybe you can identify with this lady just a little bit. You're not proud of something. You're hiding something to avoid the truth. And it's a natural response. Being guilty can lead to shame. I think about Adam and Eve in the garden, right? And they commit the first sin. And what's the first thing they do? They hide and they cover themselves. So there's a shame element to it. How do we move past that, though? Because I think there's a deeper level of shame that grips a grip on us that's beyond that initial reaction in us dealing with what we may have done or not done. It sticks with us for longer. I looked at several psychological blogs. This isn't like deep research. I just Googled it. And I asked my Google, what are symptoms of shame? And there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff that people could associate with shame, but there are two that really jump out to me as I look through the list of things. And the two things that if you're like, do I experience shame? These are two symptoms you can look for. One is isolation, and the other one is avoiding the truth. Isolation and avoiding truth. Isolation is I'm scared of getting close to people. I don't want them to find out. I don't want them to know. There's a lot of I'm scared of getting, and avoiding the truth. Do you exaggerate the truth to cover up what you're not proud of? Do you make up other stories? And so those two things are part of shame. Our psychology is complicated. There's so much more than just those two environment and chemistry going on in our brains. There are experiences that we go through. So I don't want to oversimplify all of our psychology. Some of us truly do need long sessions with counseling so we can work through some of this stuff. But if this is some basic symptoms that you identify in your life, maybe you could say, oh, maybe that's part of the heaviness I feel. It's a shame that I'm carrying with you. And so this is what this woman, I think, is going through as she approaches the well. How does Jesus react to a shame-separated sinner? That's actually the point of the story. Not that she did some bad stuff, maybe not, I don't know. But the question is, how does Jesus react? And I think the answer was found actually all the way back in verse 4 when we first looked at it. The answer is this: Jesus goes out of his way to meet people in their shame. That's what the story is. So if we rewind it, you don't have to look at it. If you don't look in your Bibles, you can. But if you look at verse 4, it says this interesting sentence. Now he had to go through Samaria. Anytime you've ever heard a teaching on this, you might have actually heard this little line and someone's identified it. Here's the fact. Jesus traveling from Galilee to Jerusalem, to Judea. That's a path he took a lot from the north to the south. The reality is Jesus did not have to go through Samaria. Samaria is in the middle. As a Jew, I will give you just the bare bones, brass tacks of this thing. Jews just didn't go through Samaria. There is generations of racism and history and even political and religious stuff. Basically, Jews look down on Samaritans and they're like, I'm not going through Samaria. And they would take the long way through. They would go around. They would go completely around Samaria. Jesus, it says here, he had to go through Samaria. But the truth is, he didn't have to go through Samaria for geographical reasons, to save some money on gas or to on his his sandals. The had to go through Samaria is like saying to a Duke fan, you have to wear a Carolina shirt during this basketball game. You're like, I do not have to wear this t-shirt. There was a lot going on there where you could say Jesus did not have to go through Samaria, but there's another piece of it. If you look, in fact, through a lot of Jesus' stories, you find that he actually places himself in scenarios so that he can make certain things happen, so that he can encounter certain people. The reason I think he had to go through Samaria is because there was a woman there who was going to be drawing water at noon, and she needed somebody to love her. How does Jesus respond to our shameful, sinful selves? He goes out of his way to meet us. He makes time for us. And so I picture him just sitting on the edge of this well. I'm picturing this medieval times British, well. I don't know what the well looked like. Probably a hole in the ground. I don't know. But it's he's just sitting there waiting. And as she walks up, he's like, right on time. I had to come here because I had to talk to you. And you're going to find out why in just a second. It's pretty impressive what he allows her to do. So he goes through Samaria. And our friend, the woman, sees him sitting there, and I just have to know she's thinking what's he doing here? Who's this guy? This is my time. I come in the middle of the day intentionally so I don't have to see anybody. But she ends up having a conversation with him. Jesus starts the conversation with this sentence. Hey, will you give me a drink? Could you give me a drink, please? He's thirsty. Okay, he's just traveling. He's just passing through. Sure, I'll just get him a drink. But he asks, will you get me a drink? And this is interesting. A lot of people have commented on the fact that when he spoke to her, she probably would have recognized where he was from. He's a Galilean. That's the northern portion of the area where he lived in. And the Galileans were kind of a backwater kind of group. They kind of had, if you're from the South, you don't know about it. We don't know how we talk. But you guys who migrated here from the north, y'all know all about it. Like, I can't understand a thing. He said, so often, and here's the thing, I work hard on this, but so often someone from New Jersey will come and they'll sit in church and I'm like, Chris, you did a great job preaching, but man, you talk so fast. I'm like, really? I talk half the speed of my whole family. This is the South, right? So if you're sitting there at the well and this guy says, can I have a drink? Immediately she would have been like, wait, he's not from around here. Maybe he's dressed different. You're a Galilean. You're a Jew. What are you doing here? So suddenly her guard goes up a little bit extra. And as we read it, they have this conversation. And he says, can you give me some water? And she goes, well, I mean, how are you going to get, I can get you some water. And he goes, well, I'll tell you what, if you get the water, if you knew who was asking, you would ask me for water. Because the one who was asking will give you living water. And you'll never be thirsty again. This is an interesting part of the story. There's a thing in the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 2. It's not going to be on the screen, but you can just look it up if you want to. In Jeremiah chapter 2, Jeremiah, if you don't know Jeremiah, basically he's just brokenhearted about the state of Israel. And this is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before the woman at the well story. But he's brokenhearted, and God uses the prophet Jeremiah to talk to the nation of Israel and tell them, like, listen, you have strayed so far from me. He compares the nation of Israel to temple prostitutes. And he's like, you're cheating on me. You're going behind my back. You're worshiping other gods. You're doing all kinds of detestable things with those other gods. So that's the book of Jeremiah in a nutshell. But when you get to chapter 2, starting at verse 13, he says, my people have committed two sins. One, they have forsaken me, the spring of living water. This phrase, living water, that Jesus is using, it's actually the title of our whole series, traces its way all the way back to the book of Jeremiah. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water. The second thing they've done, they have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. This is something we tend to do. Perry gave some great advice to our high school graduates. He said, listen, put God at the center of your life, right? And that's a metaphor that we might use. This metaphor of living water is huge. Living water is a spring, you know. It's a river. It's a natural body. It's coming out of the earth. It's always fresh. It's always drinkable. It's always cool. It's always good. A cistern is a different thing. Well, thank the Lord we don't use cisterns anymore. It's just a big hole in the ground, and you just collect water there no matter how muddy, no matter how much gross stuff gets in. And then, like, because I can't dig a well in this area, I just collect it. Maybe some of the most basic ones is just like clay that gets hard, and we put rocks on top, and this, as it rains, it just fills it up, and we hope there's water in there. This is a cistern. It is not clean water. It's not a good place. And not only that, the cisterns that they've built can't even hold water. They're leaking. Okay, what's the metaphor? The idea is, man, how often do we not place God at the center of our life? And instead we're like, I can be nourished. I'll build my own cistern. What are the cisterns we build? Oh, I got this career, man. I did so good in school, man. You know how many pluses I got behind that A? I did so good. I started my own business. I got all this money. People respect me. Cistern. And it rains money, and it rains respect, and it rains notoriety, and it fills up. And when I get empty, you know where I go for a drink? I dig in the cistern. It's a little bit muddy, but it keeps me going. But if you've ever tried to live off of that energy, you know that cistern can't hold water. You can never keep it full. Even the water that's not very good. Jesus says, I'm the living water. You can come to my spring anytime. It never runs dry, and it's always fresh and clean. You follow that? So when Jesus says, I don't know if the Samaritan woman was as up on her book of Jeremiah or not. A lot of people would have maybe recognized this at the time. I think that John does, the guy who wrote this gospel. I think that's why he makes sure he remembers that line. But he said, if you knew who was asking you, you would come to me and ask for a drink, because I'm giving living water. She's confused about it. He goes, okay, well, fine. Go call your husband. Now, if you follow the story so far, you understand she doesn't have a husband right now, not technically. She's got these ex-husbands, and it's a mess. And then Jesus answers her, well, you're right to say you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with now is not your husband. And she does what a lot of us want to do when people bring up that painful part of our life, the shameful part. You know what she does? She changes the subject. She immediately changes the subject. In verse 19, she says this. Follow the conversation. If you've ever had a conversation with someone who just doesn't stick to the topic, you see this happening. It's like, go get your husband. I don't have a husband. Oh, yeah, that's right. And she says in verse 19, oh, sir, I can see that you're a prophet. Our ancestors worshiped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that this is a place where we must worship is Jerusalem. She changes the subject. I can see that you're a prophet is kind of a transitional sentence, and that's what I have up on the screen. But the idea is like, okay, so you know something about me. You some kind of prophet, some kind of mind reader, some kind of magician. All right, let's just change the subject. Let's talk about how we worship. And they go into this conversation about worship. Should it be in Jerusalem? Should it be up here in Samaria? What does it look like? Jesus has some really great stuff to share there. That's not what we're getting into today, all the way through verse 24. But as she's talking to him, her mind is racing. Who is this guy? Like, how does he know this stuff about me? I think that they must have talked a lot more because of what's about to happen. It takes us a long time to trust somebody. And I would imagine a lady who's been through so much hurt, it might take her even longer to trust somebody. She's about to all in trust Jesus in just a second here, okay? So I don't know what all they talked about. John only records a couple little sentences. But as she's wondering, who is this guy? Who am I talking to? Verse 25. She's like, well, I know that the Messiah, that's the Christ, the chosen one of Israel, that we talked about him so far a lot in this series, but it's just this kind of concept that the Jews considered. Someone is going to come one day who's going to deliver all of Israel and help us set up a new kingdom and help us set up a new way. I know that Messiah, the Christ, is coming, and when he comes, he'll explain everything to us. So that's kind of how she closes the books on this conversation about worship and the Samaritans versus the Jews. But then Jesus answers in the most unexpected way. Jesus declares, guilty. I who speak to you am he. It's funny you mentioned the Messiah. Ta-da! This is huge because he hasn't told anybody this yet. Even his closest disciples are still working out. Is he the Messiah? And he's like, oh Lord, are you the Messiah? And he's like, well, who do you say that I am? Who people, he's in all these like riddles with him. But this woman, because the disciples aren't with him at this moment. They go into town to get some McDonald's. They said they went to go get some food. So they're gone, and it's just the two of them sitting there. He went out of his way to meet her in her shame. And you know what she needed to hear? God is near. In fact, I who speak to you am he. And I can't answer your questions. Skip down to verse 28. I told you, she jumps all in. Then, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to town and said to the people, come and see the man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? And they came out of town and they made their way toward him. The conversation ends pretty abruptly. It's interesting that she leaves her water jug there. Like, there's a lot of stories where people leave behind the thing that they value in that moment. They just leave it. There's some fishermen who drop their nets. There's some other people who just walk away from their careers. She leaves the water jug. That's a big deal. That'd be a big deal, right? And she runs to town and she says, I've got to tell people about this dude that I met. They got to know the Messiah is with us. And look what happens. Verse 39, so skip down a little bit more. Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of this woman's testimony. He told me everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them, and so he did stay for 2 more days. And because of his words, many more became believers. They said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. I wish I could have heard the sermons he preached in those 2 days. He convinces basically the whole countryside that he's the guy that he says he is. Which is interesting because he's going to go to Jerusalem. They're not going to believe him. But out here, on the testimony of this woman, they flock to him, they hear him, and they start to turn their lives around. I want you to notice something here. The priority that this woman made after she understood who Jesus was. Who did she go tell? Now, the text says, like, the people in her village. But who were they? They were the very people she was trying to avoid. She set up her entire day to avoid being with these people. And why? Because of everything she had ever done. What becomes her testimony? You know what? I know everything I've ever done. And so do you, apparently. But God knows. And I'm no longer ashamed of that. We can drag it out into the open and we can deal with this. And I want you to know this person that I met because I think something powerful is happening. Why this sudden change? It's revolutionary change. Because she'd met Jesus. She had met, and we talked about this in week 1, but if you're new or you haven't picked up on this concept, Jesus is God in the flesh. There was just something about being in his presence. And there's many times where he does miracles. Ty preached on that 2 weeks ago where he said, why does Jesus do these miracles? And a lot of it was to help people have faith, like so that they could see that he has the power. But for her, it wasn't a miracle that she needed. She just needed his presence. She needed someone to listen. She needed someone to tell her, like, the shame that you're feeling, it doesn't define you. I've got something bigger. I've got something more. You don't solve problems by just solving the symptoms. Some of y'all try this. You drive your car, and that little red engine light comes on, and you're like, man, and then you get out like a black marker, and you like color it in. It's fine. Fixed it. No. That's a symptom. The symptom is that light came on. The symptom is it's going, sugar. It shouldn't do that. Those are symptoms. You don't just cover up symptoms. No, you go to the auto parts store, you give them to check the code, or you take it to the shop, and you fix that problem, and then the light goes off, right? You know this. You don't just like, I got a cough. Oh, if I just like, nobody hears it, I'm not sick anymore. No, maybe you have something else going on deeper than that. You have to dive in. You don't solve a problem by just trying to cover up the symptoms. Shame allows us to do that sometimes. I don't want to talk about it, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to cover it up. I don't want to be with people, so you know how I'm going to fix that? I'm just not going to be with people. Or whatever it is. But it doesn't solve the root problem. We have to treat the problem at the core, and then the symptoms will start to get better. Will you maybe walk with a limp, or carry some baggage, or have some scars? Yeah, that's life. But you can walk proudly and strongly because the core issue has been dealt with. And that's what Jesus came to deal with. The symptom of isolation, the symptom of avoiding the truth, all get exposed through Jesus for this woman. You're not alone anymore. I'm here. Also, you've been hiding from the truth, but she runs in and she tells everybody everything she's ever done. Now, that's bold, and maybe you're not ready to do that right away. But what I want you to understand is that Jesus saw her in her shame, and he dealt with her shame, and she was never going to be the same. And this is the coolest thing about the story. She becomes the first evangelist to go out and tell an entire village that the Messiah is here. I talked about Mary on Easter Sunday and talked about how important her role was in telling people about the resurrected Jesus. But before Mary Magdalene did that message, you know who was able to preach the first sermon about the Messiah? This Samaritan woman full of shame. And the whole town comes in and they believe. A movement not even among the Jews, which is really the primary group he came to meet. Isn't that amazing? What are you wrestling with? What are you dealing with? And what could God do in your life if you would be willing to let go and let God? And get out of the isolation and start to abide in the truth. I don't know what each one of us needs to do today, but every week I try to give us a little bit of a challenge, something we can take home. And this is what I want to give us this week. This is the challenge. This week, I want you to deal with a sin problem at the root by dragging out of the darkness into the light. Every single week, we say shine light in dark places. It's kind of our mantra. It's our motto. It's our mission statement. It's what we want to go and do. But sometimes the deepest darkness is just what I'm wrestling with right here. And you know what? Sometimes we actually mask that with this. I come to church, and I'm smiling, and I'm pretty, and I serve, and I do all this stuff. But deep down inside, you're like, I just haven't dealt with some kind of darkness I'm wrestling with. So my challenge for you this week is let's deal with the problem at the roots. Stop isolating about it. Talk to somebody. Stop living in lies about it. In fact, ask yourself, what lie am I believing right now? And what is the truth that would set me free from that? And it's going to look different for every single one of us in this room. But if you do that, the things God can do in your life, this woman 2,000 years later is still an inspiration to us. Think about what it could do for your family, for your children, for your spouse, for your coworkers, for your neighbors, for the people that see you online, for the people that you have influence over. Just to say, I got to get this out. And it's not because it's me. I'm not digging my own cistern so I can deal with my own problems. It's me giving it over to Jesus and saying, I'm only going to go him for the living water to quench my spiritual thirst so that I never have to drink from this cistern ever again. There's a passage in the book of Ephesians I want to close with. This is Ephesians chapter 5, verses 11 through 12, and it will be on the screen, I think. And it says this: having nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather exposing them. That's what it means to drag our sin from the darkness into the light. That's what confession is about. That's what accountability is about. So I said, I got to share this with somebody. Exposing them. It is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes light. That last sentence is powerful. That's what I want to close with. When the light of Jesus shines on our darkness, even though it might feel shameful, even though it might have been sinful, God can use that thing and turn it into light. The number of times I've sat with someone who shared their story with me, and they've lived their life for Jesus, and they're making a big difference, and they come through and they talk about the darkest moments in their life, I no longer look at them and think, you scumbag, how bad a person were you? Instead, I'm like, wow, God is using that brokenness to show me his presence. Everything that is illuminated becomes light. So sometimes you wrestle with how to shine your light in dark places. Sometimes it's just like, I just got to dig out some of this mess and lay it out for God to see, for my closest friends to see. I'm not recommending you make a big billboard and post all your personal sins up there. That's a whole different problem. But to pull it out and deal with the shame so that you can walk in truth and forgiveness and new life. And this is what it means to drink from the living water. Let me pray for us today.